Hey, it's Pastor Dudley Rutherford on Godly Goosebumps. Thank you for joining us here today. And I am always excited to tell you another story, to read another story. I think you may or may not know this, but when Jesus was here on this planet, you know how he did most of his teaching? Simply by telling stories, or what we know as parables. He would tell a story and it would have a meaning to it. Sometimes it was a hidden meaning, and sometimes it was an obvious meaning. And today we're going to tell one of those stories. It's kind of like a modern-day parable. And again, we tell all different kinds of stories on this podcast. We interview people. We sometimes just read stories out of the Bible, true stories. We listen to these personal testimonies of some. But then we tell stories, again, the gist of it is we're only God could pull this stuff together. And this story today primarily is a parable, primarily is a story that we're going to try to draw some truth out of it, but I think it's an interesting story. When I read it, it spoke to my heart, and I want to read it to you here today. It's a story that's called The Builder. And once upon a time, long time ago, there were two brothers. So I want you to picture two brothers who lived on adjoining farms. So here's brother number one, this is brother number two. They lived right across from one another. And they had gotten along for many, many years, but the time came where they fell into conflict with one another. They had some disagreements, and there grew a division between the two brothers. And anytime there's a division between siblings, it's never a good thing. It always breaks my heart whenever I hear of anybody falling out of relationship, especially when they're the same family. So you got two brothers live in adjoining farms. They fall into conflict. It was actually the first serious rift in 40 years of farming side by side. They had never had a problem. They shared machinery. They traded labor and goods as needed without a hitch. But eventually, the relationship fell apart. It began with a small misunderstanding. It grew into major differences, and finally, it exploded into an exchange of bitter words, followed by weeks of silence. They literally stopped talking to one another. They were so mad at one another. And one morning, as the story goes, there was a knock on John's door. That was one of the brothers. And he opened it to find a man with a carpenter's toolbox. And the carpenter looked up at John and said, "I'm looking for a few days' work." That's all he said. "I'm looking for a few days' work. Perhaps you have a few jobs here that I could do around the farm. Can I help you? Do you need any help?" "Yes," the older brother said, I do have a job for you." He said, "I want you to look across the creek at the farm over yonder." He said, "That's my neighbor. In fact, it's my younger brother. And last week, there was a meadow between us, a beautiful meadow. And my brother, he took his bulldozer to the river levee, and now there's a large creek between us. It's almost like a river that he created. Well, he may have done this to spite me, but I want to go him one better." He said, "Do you see that pile of lumber?" He said this to the carpenter. He said, "Do you see the pile of lumber over there by the barn? I want you to build a fence, an 8-foot fence. So I won't need to see his place. I won't need to see his farm. I won't need to see his house. I won't need to see his face anymore." The carpenter said, "I think I understand the situation. Show me the nails and the post hole digger, and I'll be able to do a job that pleases you." The older brother had to go to town, and so he helped the carpenter get the materials ready, and then he was off for the day. The carpenter worked hard all that day, measuring, sawing, nailing. After sunset, when the farmer returned, the carpenter had just finished his job. The farmer's eyes opened wide. His jaw dropped. There was no fence there at all. Instead, there was a bridge stretching from one side of the creek to the other. It was a fine piece of work with handrails and everything that comes with a nice sturdy bridge. And as he walked to the bridge to see it up close, across on the other side, he saw his younger brother was walking towards him, coming across the bridge with his hand outstretched. And he hears his brother say these words, "You are quite a fella to build this beautiful bridge after all I've said and done to you." The two brothers stood at each end of that bridge, and then they met in the middle, taking each other's hands. They turned to see the carpenter hoist his toolbox up on his shoulder and began to walk away. "No, wait, stay a few more days," he said. "I've got some other projects for you. I'd love to have you stay. Don't leave." But the carpenter said, "Oh, I have to leave because I have many more bridges to build." Oh, I love that story. Two brothers fighting, arguing. Carpenter shows up. He asked for a fence to be built. His brother had built the creek, so he wants to build a fence so he doesn't have to see his brother. The carpenter builds a bridge across there, and he comes home, and he sees his brother walking across because there was a man who was a bridge builder, and the two of them, as the story goes, lived happily ever after as brothers and neighbors, as they should. And what is the point there of that story? Oh, listen. We live in the most divided times. I mean, it doesn't matter the subject. We've always had things we've argued over, but today it doesn't matter. It's not like one major issue we're divided on. It's like every major issue we're divided on. This country is full of hatred and bitterness and people not getting along. The vitriol is sickening if you look on social media. And I think that what the world needs, I'm glad you asked what we need. We need bridge builders. We need people who will build bridges, not build fences, but build bridges. I think of the passage in Colossians chapter 3. Yes. Colossians 3 tells us how, as believers, as Christians, how we should be living our lives. In fact, the chapter is titled in the NIV, Rules for Holy Living. But I want to read to you this one section. Colossians 3:12, "Therefore, as God's chosen people, holy and dearly loved, clothe yourselves with compassion, kindness, humility, gentleness, and patience. Bear with each other and forgive whatever grievances you may have against one another. Forgive as the Lord forgave you." It's probably the secret to life is learning how to forgive. And forgiving is giving. You don't hold on to a grudge. You don't hold on to the past. You don't hold on to someone else's mistreatment of you. You learn how to forgive. And the Bible says to forgive as the Lord has forgiven you. If you think about it, everything that you have ever done wrong and everything that I have ever done wrong, we broke the heart of God. We sinned literally against God. And yet God forgives us. The Bible makes it clear, I don't want to go into all this right now, but as we have been forgiven, we're to take that forgiveness and pass it on to others. Verse 14 says, "And over all these virtues put on love, which binds them all together in perfect unity. Let the peace of Christ rule in your heart, since we as members of one body, you were called to peace." We've been called to peace. We've been called to live together in perfect unity. Oh, that's a high-attaining goal that we all have. And we might think it's unobtainable, but through Jesus Christ, all things are possible. I want you this week to think about this story, the two brothers fighting, arguing. They'd been getting along forever. Something little grows into something big. One brother builds a creek between the two. Other brother wants to build a fence so he doesn't have to see his brother. But the carpenter had wisdom to build that bridge. And I want you to look for ways to build a bridge. And in so doing, you'll bring peace and unity to this world. We'll be a better world, a better city, a better state, a better country, a better people if we could learn, instead of fighting and dividing, learning how to get along. Thank you for joining us today on Godly Goosebumps. Please, 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 before you leave, hit that subscribe button. Share this story, Facebook, Instagram, and YouTube. If you're listening, you can watch it on YouTube. Give us a follow. Give us a shout out. Go to our website, godlygoosebumps.com. And if you have a story that you'd like to hear us tell, send that story. You can do that at the website, godlygoosebumps.com. God bless you. We'll see you here next week. Godly Goosebumps. God bless.